A bombshell for President Obama as more than 50 State Department officials signed an internal memo protesting his policies in Syria. They're actually calling for targeted military strikes against the Assad regime. This as Russian jets are bombing U.S.-backed forces in Syria, despite emergency calls and even demands asking them or telling them to stop. Either way, they're not listening. Joining me now, Mustafa Temez, Gina Loudon, and Representative Ron DeSantis. Representative DeSantis, again, you were a Navy lieutenant commander. You fought in Iraq. At this point, what should the strategy be? I know we've made a lot of mistakes in Syria. Some people are intimidated. They think Vladimir Putin has dug in too deep. Some are saying we don't know who these rebels are that we're supporting in the first place. Where do you stand on this?
Well, I think it's an absolute mess. I think if you go back to 2011, there was an opportunity to partner with some relatively pro-Western forces. But now, if you look at it, you have Assad being propped up by both Putin and Iran and Hezbollah. All of those actors are hostile to the United States. Most of the reasonable Sunni opposition force has evaporated. And so you have the Islamic State, you have Jabhat al-Nusra, an al-Qaeda offshoot, and other Sunni militants. So there's not a lot of people to make common cause with. So I think it's pretty clear that when the next president takes office, January 2017, that whole region, including Western Iraq, is going to be an absolute mess.
So, Mustafa, how should we go about this? Because what we've seen is this sort of scorched earth approach with the Russian military might aiding Assad. And it's been very successful as far as Assad is concerned, but we've also seen children, women, everyone, it doesn't matter, hospitals annihilated. And, you know, I know a lot of Americans want to step back and just let those people kill each other, but do you think that's the right approach?
Well, I agree with the congressman. It is a huge mess. Russia started its bombing, I think, September of last year. And so far, 1,500 civilians have been killed. And it adds to the complication of the issue, because even if we try to go after Assad and try to bomb him, then our Air Force ends up, countering what Russia is doing. So this is a very complicated region. And I agree with the congressman that the next president will have to be someone who could bring this thing somewhat under control.
There's no doubt about that, guys, but you're not telling me how they might do that. But let me ask you this, Gina. After this past weekend in Orlando, the conversation shifted back to how to beat ISIS, and I think overwhelmingly everyone does agree it's a caliphate situation. They won't be able to inspire others, particularly in countries like America, if they are annihilated over there. Do we go into Raqqa? I mean, we've had success with the air campaign, but there's no doubt there's got to be boots there. Do they have to be American boots? And just how much of a commitment do we need to make that place safer?
I think that what we need to talk about here is that I believe Obama created this crisis, like he's done this with other regime changes, Charles, that you know about. If you look at Libya, you look at Egypt and Tunisia, we've seen this before. He goes in, and the thing about regime changes, Charles, is that you can create the regime change. We get that. But you can't control what happens next. I don't understand why we're not learning from this. And I think that we need to be out of it. I think that Obama is doing this, and I think it really comes down to, and I think that this is what nobody wants to say, the pipeline from Iran to Europe. That's what this is really about. This is about money, and this is about natural gas.
Representative DeSantis, it is an interesting quandary. There's no doubt about it. Is it possible we walk away and Russia and Assad do the work that we want done anyway, and they find a way to get into Raqqa, destroy ISIS, and maybe defeat them that way?
I think that's wishful thinking. I mean, ultimately, Putin and Iran and Assad, they may be opposed to the Islamic State to a certain extent, but the Islamic State may also serve their purposes of that's where American fire is trained on. So they may want to have an Islamic State presence there rather than have Western fire trained on them. But I think ultimately Iran is a big part of this, and the Iran deal, right, I think, sent a signal to all the Sunni Arabs in the region, in both Western Iraq and Eastern Syria, that the U.S. is tilting towards the Shia. All right. And a lot of these Sunni Arabs who are not necessarily radical.
Yeah,
they're going to join with ISIS.
Have a great weekend, everyone.